I cannot believe I'm actually making this video. It's been a minute, my One Piece goats, but now with the conclusion of Luffy versus Lucci being reached, I can finally talk about Lucci scaling and basically addressing the whole he scales to Gear 5 Luffy! Because we unironically have YouTubers making videos debating on if Lucci is Yonko level or not, and this is getting a little out of hand for me. And while also shining light on Lucci scaling, I also want to shine light on Kaido scaling, as I don't really think I ever really discussed his scaling directly on the channel. So, allow me to cook, ladies and gentlemen. To start off, we are obviously only going to be mentioning the manga because Lucci before the recent chapters is fodder and isn't even a factor for the topic of discussion. The reason why people unironically make this a fight is because of this scan right here, implying Gear 5 Luffy went all out on Lucci, and Lucci, who could survive his hits, I guess, but was mostly getting folded, would go on to live to see another day. As for this scan, well, Luffy is probably talking about in terms of power-ups because for one, he doesn't use advanced armament, and two, Luffy literally clowns on Lucci for pretty much the whole fight. So the interpretation of Luffy using everything on Lucci is not true. He could just be talking about the power-up directly because obviously Gear 4 with Haki would be way more significant than just Gear 4 without it. And since he isn't using his advanced types of Haki against Lucci, this is the only conclusion we would come to. And we know as well Gear 5 massively drains Luffy regardless. So this is really only at best a scan that just says that Luffy depleted a lot of stamina against Lucci, which wouldn't contradict anything. And like I said before, Lucci literally gets clowned on by Luffy, but you know what? Just because he lives to see another day, I'll say at best, he low-end scales to Gear 5 Luffy. I'm giving you guys the benefit of the doubt here. Kaido is a character that is for sure controversial in his own right, with a lot of the fan base believing him to be top 1 of the verse. For this section, I think I'd like to address everything regarding his feats against Luffy, and not even bring up that whole argument since it's an annoying and separate discussion to be had, and really doesn't matter when it comes to Kaido versus Lucci directly. Now, as for Kaido, we already know on Rooftop he was bopping the likes of Law, Kid, Killer, Zoro, and Luffy, and even after fighting all 5 of them, he and Luffy were proceeding to grow more and more powerful as the fight went on. He would then go on to fight Yamato, and then grow even more powerful, and then fight Gear 5 Luffy on top of all of this. And mind you, Kaido the entire time on Rooftop has not been recovering from his injuries, has only been getting weaker and weaker, obviously not physically because of Haki Bloom, but in terms of like stamina and endurance, he'd only be getting weaker and weaker, and Luffy would go on to literally come back from the dead like multiple times in his fight with Kaido. Kaido literally beat Luffy like 3 times before Luffy actually defeated him. And not to mention, Kaido not only took all of these attacks, but these attacks were literal specific precautions to harm Kaido. Law can literally stab Kaido's internal organs, Luffy and Zoro can hit through his durability, Killer can also damage Kaido internally, and then before that, the 9 Scabbards were literally using Rio to even get a scratch on Kaido, and despite this, Luffy still didn't no-diff him at his full power. Fully healed, by the way. Now, just from the looks of it, it is not looking well for the boy Lucci. His best scaling is living, and not even scaling, just living against Gear 5 Luffy with no types of advanced Haki. Meanwhile, Kaido took on a Gear 5 Luffy using this on top of surviving a 5-way wombo combo, and then before that surviving a 9-way wombo combo, and still being more impressive than Lucci. Literally, an injured Kaido in his fight with Gear 5 Luffy would one-shot Lucci with 0 effort, let alone a Kaido at full HP. Are we really going to sit here and say Lucci is going to survive this? You're going to look at me straight in the eyes and swear up and down your soul that Lucci is damaging Kaido like this? Stop that capery, please. Lucci sucks, and just because he can beat Fodder Curry does not mean he's taking out Kaido.